paid my dues time after time.
So I'm kind of late to the whole Mandela Effect trend that happened in 2016, but I guess it's better late than never. The Mandela Effect is this theory where basically a large group of people share these false memories, and the running explanation is that there are these parallel universes that pretty much spilled into our universe, causing us to have these false memories. Now, personally, when I first heard of this, no doubt I questioned the sanity of anyone who believed in this BS until I learned about what it was based off of. If you're into physics or quantum mechanics, you probably heard about Schrodinger's cat. Basically, this Austrian physicist wanted to study these particles and how they can exist in all possible states at the same time. Now, to someone who hasn't really learned about this is probably very confusing, so I'm going to use this example to try and explain it. Basically, what he did was he took this cat and put it in a box with a piece of radioactive material, a flask with poisonous gas, and this Geiger counter, which basically detects whether the radioactive material is decayed or not. And if it is decayed, the flask is smashed and the cat dies. But if it is not decayed, the flask is not smashed and the cat lives. So basically, in this sense, it seems like there's a 50-50 chance of the cat either living or dying. But the weird thing with quantum mechanics is that you can have particles that basically assume all possible states at the same time, meaning that these radioactive particles can be decayed and not decayed at the same time. In the real world, this is pretty much impossible, but in the quantum world, this is normal in a sense. So basically, since the particle can be decayed and not decayed at the same time, it means that the cat can be dead and alive at the same time. They basically call this superposition, but this is of course a theory because superposition cannot be observed. So when they open the box, they are unable to see a cat that is both dead and alive at the same time. A lot of people came up with ways to explain this theory. One of the more common explanations is the theory of many universes, where basically a universe is created where the cat is alive and a universe is created where the cat is dead. And that also ties into why superposition is not observable. And that is where the Mandela Effect comes into play. Basically, they came up with this idea that there's this parallel universe where Nelson Mandela dies in prison instead of being released, and where JCPenney is spelled without an E, and that parallel universe spilled into the one we live in now, and that is how we develop these collective false memories. Now, personally, I'm not convinced by this theory at all. In all honesty, I think it's a crazy, borderline psychotic explanation for why we have collective false memories. But again, those are just my personal opinions. Without a doubt, the Mandela Effect has some scientific basis to it, but I'm going to tell you my take on the Mandela Effect and why I don't believe in it. The theory of many universes was never meant to explain the Mandela Effect. It was mainly based off of the Schrodinger's cat experiment. But to me, it seemed like people were taking advantage of this quantum theory and using it to explain the Mandela Effect. Even though it does kind of seem like a viable explanation, I personally just don't buy it. The primary reason why I don't believe in the Mandela Effect is because of our memories. I like to think of our memories as being a piece of paper. It's very easy to bend and crumble and sometimes even tear. And then when we tear it, it's impossible to get it back into the piece that it used to be. The same goes for our memory. Like, for example, if you have ever had a traumatic event in your life, or even something as little as learning to crawl or some shit like that, and you're trying to recall the details of that memory, when we reach the point of recall, our memory becomes very sensitive to changes and it can easily be fabricated. So for example, when I was 5 or 6, I remember trying to run down a sidewalk and I fell and scraped my knee. I ended up having to go to the emergency room because I got an infection, and basically they had to inject a bunch of antibiotics into my thighs. And I vividly remember them taking a needle the diameter of a fucking quarter and injecting that into my thigh. I couldn't remember the pain, but I could clearly remember them doing that for the longest time. Now let's be realistic here. If they were to have stuck a needle the diameter of a quarter into my thigh, I'd have 2 giant holes in my legs. But for the longest time, I told everyone that story at school, my friends, even my family who were there. And not until recently did I really realize how dumb I was to actually believe that story. And now this is just a personal example, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's incredibly easy to fabricate memory. It's as simple as someone either giving us misinformation or us having our emotions overrun us that can trigger us to develop false memories. Okay, so you might be wondering wondering, why would so many people share the same false memory set? Like, if 1 or 2 people have a false memory about Nelson Mandela, that's probably just a personal issue, but how are so many people having the same false recollection of him dying in prison? That can't just be all summed up by us just making false memory. This is where I think collective consciousness comes into play. Basically, collective consciousness is where a group of people who live together in the same society share similar beliefs, values, attitudes, morals, and they basically have this shared awareness, and that is what unifies each and every individual in that society. Those who don't share the same unifying values and morals in that society are considered anomie, or people who are normlessness, and those types of people are considered socially deviant, and many end up committing suicide or causing destruction in the society they live in. So this idea that we're linked in our society can explain why we have shared false memories. We tend to have the same beliefs, norms, values in our society, so in a sense, we share the same sense of awareness of our world. So when we look at the example of the Mandela Effect, since we tend to think alike in some instances, we group certain memories together in the same way, and we feel similar emotions when it comes to events like Nelson Mandela's imprisonment or 9/11. Because of that, it's not impossible for us to fabricate our memories the same way. Now keep in mind, this is just another theory. This isn't me disproving the Mandela Effect. I'm not debunking the idea of many universes. I'm just telling you why I don't believe in it. But going back to this idea of us fabricating our memories the same way, this gets a little more complex, but I'm going to try and explain it the best way I can. New memories are made in this region of the brain called the hippocampus, and then they are transferred and stored in sites in the prefrontal cortex. Memories that are similar to each other get stored closer to each other because that is the way humans learn and remember things. When you try to recall a memory, you're basically turning on the neurons that are associated with that memory. Recall is a very sensitive time for memories because it's a point where a specific memory can form new connections with other similar memories. The most realistic reasoning for that is when we were learning about the founding fathers and their contributions to the US, our memories of former presidents were stored closely to our memories of the founding fathers, so these memories overlapped, and as we continued recollecting the memories of Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin, it became linked with the memories of former presidents to the point that we mistaken them as being presidents when they were not. And as we continuously repeated these recollections, that false memory of Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin being presidents overall strengthened and became more detailed, even though the memories were invalid. The same can be explained for why many people believe Nelson Mandela died in prison, or why the Queen's song "We Are the Champions" did not end with "of the world."
We are the